When a wife buys something, her husband thinks it belongs to him too. If he can't accept that, he suggests divorce. My husband Charles often tries to take things from me for no good reason. Once, he even wanted to give gifts I bought for my parents to his own family to make himself look good. When I confronted him about this, he looked shocked. Before I married Charles, my grandparents left me a valuable gift, a piece of property. They advised me to keep it a secret from Charles, even though he's my husband. They said I should keep quiet about having a source of income and enough money to live comfortably. I felt a bit sorry for Charles, but I chose to follow my grandparents' advice. After my grandfather, who had always taken care of me, passed away, I carried on with my life with Charles. Then, something happened. One day, when I checked the account where I saved money for our living expenses, I saw that $10,000 had been taken out. This account was mostly handled by me and meant to cover the cost of living that Charles and I shared. It was a significant amount, and I couldn't recall withdrawing it myself. It seemed inevitable that Charles was the one who had taken it out. That evening, when Charles returned home, I confronted him about it. "Hey, $10,000 are gone from our living expenses account. Do you know what happened to the money?" "Yeah, I lent it to my mom. She was in some trouble," he replied casually, confirming that Charles had indeed lent the money to my mother-in-law, Lisa. "And you didn't think to inform me beforehand?" "It's all right, though. It's money I earned, so it's not a big deal. We have savings, so losing that amount won't hurt us. If Lisa needed help, I understand why you did it, but it would have been nice to hear about it from you first. After all, the account is for both of us. If it had been his own personal account from when he was single, it would have been acceptable, but withdrawing a large sum from our joint account without discussing it was a bit too much." When I sighed heavily at Charles's selfishness, he frowned and gave me an irritated look. Fine. I'll tell you next time." Charles dismissed me, clearly annoyed, and quickly walked away to the bathroom. I felt uneasy about the situation. He hadn't acted like this when we first got married. He used to listen to me sincerely. Is this how relationships change over time? A few days later, I had no choice but to visit my in-laws' house to deliver a package that had been mistakenly delivered to our address. "Oh, Megan, thanks for making the trip all the way here. Why don't you come inside since you've come all this way?" I had planned to just drop off the package at the door, but I couldn't refuse my parents-in-law's invitation, so I ended up in their living room, having tea. While there, I couldn't help but notice various luxurious items, expensive cosmetics, glamorous clothes, health products. Oh my, our wonderful son gave these to me as gifts. Since there was $10,000 in the bank account anyway, it seemed natural to spend it this way. However, knowing that Lisa needed money and Charles had lent her that exact amount, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that all of it had been spent on her luxury items. As I quietly sipped my tea, not able to muster a smile, my in-laws' cheerful expressions faded, replaced by a look of concern that seemed almost threatening. Our son is so kind and thoughtful, showering me with gifts. But what about you? Are you being a good wife to him? There's something suspicious going on. We've heard things, my father-in-law said, his tone implying accusation. He's always blamed by you for spending money on me, my mother-in-law chimed in. Now it all makes sense. They looked at me with apprehension, as if Charles had painted himself as a victim for doing something generous. I started feeling increasingly weary of both my in-laws and my husband. I never expected to be treated so poorly and overlooked like this. Finally, the idea of divorce began to take shape in my mind. I thought that if I left him, I could go back to my parents' home and use the savings from my passive income to help rebuild their lives. My parents' home is a 2-story house that was built over 30 years ago, before my brother was born. It used to accommodate our family of 5, but after my brother and I moved out, it became too large and difficult for my parents, who have trouble with their legs despite some modifications like ramps and handrails. A smaller single-story house would be much more suitable and comfortable for them. I immediately called my parents to discuss my plan to divorce Charles and rebuild their home. Surprisingly, they weren't shocked by the divorce news and were thrilled about the idea of renovating their house. Over the phone, they eagerly listened to my plans. "I'm so grateful that you're thinking of renovating it for us. Thank you. Even if we won't live there long, it's okay because you can inherit the house as it was built using your own earnings." Alright then, I'll start preparing and planning it step by step. Don't worry, take it easy. My dad and mom's reassuring words lifted my spirits. So I began the process of renovating my parents' house, waiting to hear back from the construction company when suddenly Charles confronted me. How could you use our savings to build a house without consulting me? Sitting across from each other at the living room table, Charles slammed his fist down and yelled at me, completely disregarding my feelings. Well, my parents will be living in the new house. No, that's not possible because it was built specifically for my parents. You used our joint funds to build it, so my parents have a right to live there. Are you expecting 4 people to squeeze into that small one-story house? Shut up. Just hand over the house to me, Charles yelled, banging the table loudly. I knew if I didn't mention my passive income, things would escalate even further. So I made up my mind to come clean. Actually, I have passive income. I've actually been saving from the real estate my grandparents left me as a gift. I've used that passive income to pay for the house, so none of our shared money was used. As I admitted this, feeling guilty for breaking my promise to my grandparents, Charles in front of me shook his shoulders and began banging the table even harder. What kind of wife hides her income? You're playing with my money and hiding yours like this. As his anger flared and his face turned red, I realized why my grandparents had advised me to keep my passive income secret. Perhaps they already knew what kind of person Charles was. I'll take the house as part of the divorce settlement. And remember, the house you built as my wife is also mine. I'm the head of this family, and if you defy me, I'll divorce you. I felt nothing but despair at Charles's demands and was thoroughly fed up with him. How could I have lived with someone like him without knowing who he truly was? I had planned to use my passive income when we might no longer rely solely on Charles's earnings. It was meant as a safety net in case I couldn't work due to injury or illness. I had intended to save it to sustain our life together and share it with Charles when the time was right. But now, I have no intention of spending that money on him anymore. Feel free to take it. I stood up, leaving the table and the house. I couldn't bear to be near Charles any longer. I decided to spend the night at a business hotel to calm down, intending to return home the next day. However, when I returned the next morning, Charles greeted me with a smug smile. He approached me, holding a sheet of paper he had concealed behind his back. It was divorce papers already filled out. You lied about having passive income, didn't you? You pretended to have it to cover up the fact that you were actually taking money from our joint property, didn't you? Charles' accusation bewildered me. I had told him the truth sincerely. I hadn't lied. It's true, I have passive income. Here you go again. I know you can't live without me, Charles sneered as he forcefully placed the divorce papers into my hand. Let me know when I can move in, okay? I'm off for a drink. With that, he patted my shoulder and left, humming in a cheerful mood. In that moment, I finally saw Charles for who he truly was. He hadn't changed. He had always looked down on me since the beginning of our marriage. He never truly considered my feelings. I wasted no time. I packed my things, completed the divorce papers right then and there, and left. I decided to stay with my parents temporarily and explain everything to them. We agreed that I would live with them until the new house was ready. The next day, I was dismayed to find my phone filled with missed calls from Charles. Shortly after, it rang again. Reluctantly, I answered, hoping this would be the last conversation I ever had with him. Hello. Hey. All your stuff is gone, you know. My husband's impatient tone left me with nothing but questions. He was the one who initiated the divorce, so why was he acting so flustered now that I had actually left? Huh? We're getting divorced, so it's normal for my things to be gone. I won't be coming back, so feel free to use the empty space however you like. I wondered if he sensed something different in my tone. There was silence from my husband for a few moments. Finally, it seemed he had realized that I indeed had passive income. Then, after another pause, he spoke in a surprisingly gentle voice I had never heard before. Hey, could you let my parents live in the new house? I don't mind staying with your parents, please. I already told you it's a small one-story house. Please understand. I plan to surprise my parents with it. His request left me speechless. What was he thinking? Wanting to give away a house he didn't even buy and call it a surprise? It seemed reckless beyond belief. You don't care about our savings at all, do you? I've been stressing over the money I give you as an allowance and what we save for living expenses, trying hard to manage everything. That's beside the point here. You're careless with money and leave all the hassle to others. Then act like you did everything yourself when it comes to your parents, right? As I had meticulously prepared everything for my parents, my husband suddenly fell silent, fueling my frustration even more. It's shallow of you to act like you orchestrated it all and give the house to your parents. Ultimately, you've been trying to exploit my good intentions and take control of what's rightfully mine. There's no justification for you to trample on my feelings and intentions like this. I won't hand over the house I built with all my heart and soul for my parents just so you can show off to yours. I firmly rejected Charles's proposal, and he began to loudly rant in response. But husbands and wives are supposed to help each other. We're not married anymore, are we? I've already filed for divorce. On the same day my husband, now my ex-husband, handed me the divorce papers, I submitted them to the city office. He had wanted the divorce so eagerly, and I felt it was best to move on quickly. I was already in the process of reverting all the paperwork to what it was before we were married. My ex-husband said in disbelief, "Yeah, you've already filed. Why act surprised when you're the one who wanted the divorce?" "Oh, I didn't expect you to actually leave. Let's start over. Let's talk and try to make things work this time." How could he suggest such a thing now? This is a man who used our savings for his own mother, threatened divorce, and mocked me until the very end. I had no desire to reconcile with someone like him. "No, thank you. Please give my regards to your parents," I said cheerfully before hanging up on Charles. The next day, I continued to receive voicemails and messages from him, insisting we could start over and professing his love. But I sensed his motives were only about my property and wealth. To sever all ties, I promptly blocked him and his family from contacting me. Meanwhile, the new house was completed, and my parents and I moved in, enjoying our newfound comfort. Later, I met a mutual friend who knew Charles as well. I explained that we had divorced. My friend expressed sympathy and shared what had been happening with Charles and his family. Firstly, my ex-husband abruptly submitted his resignation letter at work, claiming he no longer needed to work hard because he had acquired real estate. He then disappeared, making himself unreachable to his colleagues. However, the next day, he apparently tried to retract his resignation. His bosses understandably reprimanded him for vanishing without notice and the disruption caused by his sudden resignation letter. The company questioned him about his behavior, but Charles couldn't admit he was relying on my income, so he attempted to fabricate an explanation. Eventually, though, the truth about our divorce came to light and his lies were exposed. As a result, the company refused to reconsider his employment. Charles, who mocked my passive income as probably fake, was actually trying to benefit from my earnings and impressed his parents by giving them a house as a gift. He didn't consider me or our future at all. When I think about that, I no longer have any feelings for my ex-husband. In fact, I feel relieved. I heard that he returned to his parents' home, where they must have been tough on him because he's now scrambling to find a new job. However, his departure from his last job has made it difficult for him to secure employment. It's safe to say he's facing the consequences of his actions. As for me, I live happily with my parents in a home I built myself. I have a job that I love, and I'm enjoying life. I had been saving my passive income for Charles and our future, but now I'll use it to support those who have supported me.